welcome to our live stream event, Vertical Shorts, O-1 and EB-1 Trends, and EB-1 RFEs. I'm Brian Walker, your host for today. We have two incredible speakers, expert immigration attorneys Liz Profumo and Jordana Schwartz-Matricardi. They will share valuable insights into the latest trends in O-1 and EB-1 visas, how to navigate EB-1 RFEs, and discuss how creating vertical shorts can qualify you for the O-1 visa. Stay tuned for a fascinating session. Let's dive in.
Hey, Dad, can I borrow $50,000? Mom needs kidney dialysis and we really don't have any money.
Natalie, the thing is...
How shameless of you to come here and beg us for money.
I'll pay you guys back, I promise.
Lauren, maybe we can let her borrow the money. I mean, it's her mother that's sick.
You're still thinking about your ex-wife?
No.
Do I need to remind you this is your family now? George, without me, you'd have nothing.
Ah, it isn't my loser sister. Asking for money like a beggar? How pathetic.
Can you hear us? So if you can hear us now, let us know. Okay, so it looks like the sound is back on. Okay.
Okay, so, there's several platforms where you can watch these series. Real Short was the first one. I think they still have the biggest numbers, but there's still others like Serial Plus, Drama Box, and a bunch of other ones now where you can watch these. And apparently I have to state that none of these companies that I've mentioned are paying or endorsing us, or we're not endorsing them in any way. We're just sharing what we've seen in working on some of these cases. It also looks like there are several production companies that are cropping up that specialize in producing this format. We see projects from Crazy Maple Studios, 24K Onions, and again, many others. So thus far, we've been able to get O-1s approved for several people who are working on these series. And so we wanted to, first of all, share that information and that news and find out if anyone has any questions about using this format in these kinds of extraordinary ability cases. And I know there are a couple people who hopefully are tuned in who have submitted questions that we want to go ahead and answer at this time.
Okay. So regarding the vertical short, I don't see many questions yet in the chat. I think I'm wondering if we can still be heard. Let's see. So for
I think there were a couple of people who wrote in prior.
There are, okay. All right, so our first question is from Iris L. And she asks, and she's from Los Angeles, and she asks, as a sound mixer, are the vertical shorts helpful for my O-1 or EB-1 application in the future? If so, what kind of evidence should I be collecting other than deal memos and call sheets? And yes, as far as we know, vertical shorts are helpful for both the O-1 and the EB-1 cases. Aside from call sheets and deal memos, you want to be sure that you have public recognition, for your work on these projects. So IMDb credits, press about your role in a vertical short. Not all production companies are listing the vertical short IMDb credits online. So, just be aware of that. Other than that, what you want to focus on are collecting viewership statistics, viewership numbers for the vertical shorts, as well as, being aware of other distinguished individuals whom you have worked with on these projects as well. And so this is the type of evidence that you want to collect in terms of preparing for the O-1 or EB-1. Second question comes from Ka-El, and this one is from New York. And she asks, I have directed a vertical short series and plan to direct more. If I apply for the O-1 with the title of director, how many vertical short series should I direct, and how many hits should they receive to be qualified for applying for the O-1 visa? So this is, I think, a two-part question. Now, first of all, it is hard to definitively say what DGA is going to decide to do in terms of, your advisory opinion. They consider all of the work that you've done, including feature films, short films that have gone to, distinguished film festivals, commercials, music videos. So, they're going to look at the body of your work, but certainly we believe that the vertical shorts being a part of the body of your work will be helpful to your case. And so far, the only director that we have submitted to the DGA had, I believe, 3 vertical shorts in their profile, but they also had I think they had also co-directed a feature film. So we're not certain, how heavily the vertical shorts played into the positive opinion, but again, we imagine that it certainly helped to boost his profile. And, historically, DGA has been tougher on cases, but we do know definitively that the other unions, such as IATSE and I think PGA, have issued positive advisory opinions for cases that have had vertical shorts in their profile. Okay, so let's look at the chat. Oh, sorry.
No,
Yes.
Kat had also asked about how many viewers
Oh, yes, of course.
do we
I mean,
have to have before
yeah.
we'll use it in a case.
Thank you. So, I think in the hundreds of thousands would be ideal, if not millions. I mean, we do know that some of these vertical shorts have upwards of 3 million views. So I would say a minimum in the hundreds of thousands. Okay, so let's look at the chat, and it looks like we do have a question here. Is this for the DGA Union Advisory Letter? Yes, this question comes from Harshal. Yes, we are talking about the DGA Union Advisory Letter. So just to backtrack a little bit, before we submit the O-1 visa case to the to USCIS, it has to go through the unions to get an advisory opinion. And so, first we look to these unions to issue their letters before determining, whether this is a case that will then move on to receiving a positive answer from USCIS. And historically, the DGA has been quite tough. And so I think that's where the question sort of was leading. Okay. So any other, I don't see any other questions in the chat right now regarding vertical shorts. Liz, is there anything else that you want to mention before we move on to some other topics?
Not really. I've talked to many people in the past few months who are working on them. And at the time I talked to a lot of people and they were saying, can we use these? And because it was so new, we were working on putting together cases, but we hadn't yet submitted them to USCIS and gotten their feedback. And I was thinking to myself, I'm not sure if USCIS will say, oh, these episodes are so short that we don't consider this to be a distinguished production. However, since then, we filed many cases that have been approved, and we have gotten no negative feedback on this point from USCIS. They have not stated that the quality of these productions is in question in any way. So I'm now confident that we can use these credits in these cases.
Yeah, it's exciting. Okay, so I guess we'll move on to our next topic. Let's talk about some current trends that we are seeing with the EB-1 RFEs. I know that, actually, before we do that, I do see one more question in the chat, and I want to make sure that we cover as many vertical shorts questions as possible. So from Rand asking, for a writer, does working on vertical shorts help applying for the O-1 EB-1? And I think the answer is, the same. Yes. I mean, I have not seen any pushback from WGA in terms of, these productions. And I think of all the unions, they tend to be less stringent. So I don't imagine that they would, look down on the vertical short platform as, a viable production. Okay, and then Harshal asks, what kind of response does the DGA give that may put a negative impression on the O-1 petition? Do you want to take that one, Liz?
Sure. So anytime someone who works in the film and TV industry applies for an O-1 with USCIS, which is the federal government immigration agency, before they send to USCIS, the unions, the film and TV industry in the US is heavily unionized. And so the unions that oversee your field of endeavor have to look at the petition and issue a letter stating whether or not they object to this artist, this filmmaker working in the US. So the Directors Guild of America has historically been quite tough and has they set a high bar to issue a letter of non-objection for anyone who is maybe at the beginning of their career and hasn't had a lot of recognition. The DGA historically will issue a letter saying, we do object to this person working in the US. In years past, USCIS seemed to have this understanding that the DGA was tough, and even though the DGA would object, USCIS would still approve the case in many instances. However, in recent years, what I've noticed is that when the DGA objects, USCIS also tends to deny the case. So Harshal, I hope that answers your question, but basically what DGA can do is issue a letter. Instead of saying, I have no objection to Harshal working here, they say, I do object to Harshal working here, and then that can kind of torpedo the whole case with USCIS. Now, a colleague did tell me that recently they did submit a case with a negative DGA advisory opinion, and that they did receive a very harsh request for additional evidence. And in that case, they were able to respond and get approved. So it's not impossible to get approved with a negative DGA opinion, but it makes the chances of approval much, much lower, unfortunately. So I hope that answers your question. Oh, and actually, I want to mention, for anyone who either can't stay through the end of our talk or has other things to do, you can go to our website and send us a message to schedule a personal consultation with either of us, excuse me, and we'll be happy to immediately get back to you and get that scheduled for you.
Okay, so I think that does complete the vertical shorts portion of the live stream. So we're going to move on to our next topic, which is EB-1 RFEs. So let's talk about current trends that we're seeing. Now, we'll just start off, by noting that right now we are seeing RFEs in about 25% of cases. So, just something to keep in mind. Now, I guess we'll just move on to, what are the current trends with EB-1 RFEs?
Okay, and the first thing I want to say about EB-1s and evidence for EB-1s, excuse me, is that USCIS tends to be inconsistent in adjudication of these cases, meaning that it's logical that if a case is great, it gets approved, and if a case is not great, it has more of a chance of being denied. But that's not what we actually see with these EB-1s. It seems that sometimes, really weak cases fly right through, and sometimes really great cases get hung up. So there is a bit of an unpredictable nature. But when USCIS doesn't approve a case outright and requests more evidence, we wanted to share with you some of the things we tend to see. I've noticed that a lot of people I talk to read the requirements for the EB-1, and they say to themselves and to us, oh, I think I'm really well qualified, and this is the evidence I have. And Jordana and I are thinking to ourselves, oh, that is good, but USCIS is going to pick it apart by saying this, this, and this. And so we wanted to share with you some of those things that they're saying. So let's talk about awards. So for an O-1, if you've been nominated or shortlisted for an award, that's great. For an EB-1, they will only consider an award if you have won it. So they can't consider nominations to meet this category. And specifically, they really like personal awards, and as opposed to awards that are shared with a department, a team, etc. So I'm not saying it's impossible to win this category if you are part of a team that won an award, but the best evidence that they really like is a personal award with your name on it. Okay. The next criteria is membership. Membership in organizations that require outstanding achievements of their members. And so for this, a lot of times they'll say, well, the evidence that every single member has to be outstanding is not sufficient. A lot of times, the way we prove that all the members have to be outstanding is by getting a letter from the organization that confirms that fact. And sometimes immigration will come back to us and say, well, you do have a letter, but we want other objective proof. We want some kind of publication that states this. So that's a challenge we see sometimes. Press. This is one that they commonly pick on. They want to see press about you related to your work. So the feedback that we see on occasion is that the press is not about you. If it mentions your work, they'll say, oh, it's really about your work and not about you. And furthermore, it is not in a major publication. And so we have to defend both the content of the article as well as the publication. Jordana, do you want to talk a little bit about maybe judging and original contribution?
Yeah, absolutely. For judging, this is a great category. In fact, we find that USCIS tends to give you the judging criteria as long as you've judged. However, there are instances where we have seen this point RFE'd, specifically if you are not judging other professionals in your field. So we have seen a case get called out if the judging was for a student competition. So it's really imperative that the judging is done for other professionals. And then the other issue I've seen is if the judging was outside of your field of expertise. So let's say you are a dancer and choreographer. You want to be judging a dance competition, not a film festival, for best producer. So, you want to make sure that you are judging in your particular field, your field of expertise, akin to your job title. Is there anything else that you wanted to point out for the judging?
There is. It's not related to an RFE, but it's a question that I get, a question and a comment. The regulation for judging is we want to show that you have served as a judge of the work of your peers, either as an individual or as part of a panel.
Mm-hmm.
And so I talk to a lot of people that say, oh, I'm going to be speaking on a panel, and therefore I meet this criteria. And I want to clarify that speaking on a panel is different than being part of a judging panel. So, speaking on a panel doesn't directly meet any of these criteria. However, it does help usually to establish that you're an expert in your field, and we therefore can use it somewhere else in the petition. But speaking on a panel is not the same as judging on a panel.
Yes, that's a good point. For scholarly articles, so that's articles that you write, from your point of view as an expert in your field. We just want to clarify that, it should be technical writing and written, again, for others in your profession. So a general article that you've written that is published on medium.com is likely going to get called out in an EB-1 RFE.
Yeah, USCIS does not like Medium
No.
for whatever reason. So
Yeah,
they hate Wikipedia. They don't like Medium.
exactly. Yeah. For the criteria, critical role to organizations or departments or divisions within an organization, it's just important to point out that it's you really want to focus on your role to the company or organization as a whole, not the productions per se. So with the O-1 visa, there is a criteria. Did you play a lead or critical role to distinguish productions? And so we definitely argue that when it comes to the O-1, but for the EB-1, we have to prove that your role is critical to the company as a whole. And so we have seen RFEs, come through when trying to point out that the role was critical to the production. There is I think I've done some cases where we've tried to use that as comparative or comparable evidence.
Mhm.
And, sometimes it goes through, sometimes it doesn't. It's a very, it's a very highly subjective analysis. The officer that's reviewing the case, they have a lot of discretion, I feel. And so, while it's not impossible that you can argue comparable evidence, the best evidence would be to show that you are critical to the company as a whole.
Right. And one thing that I'm also seeing on this point is they like to see that people who are arguing this are on payroll. I'm noticing that for people who are independent contractors, who might be many of you tuning in, and many people who work in the entertainment industry and are creatives in general, USCIS likes to see that you are, to meet this category of being in a critical role, that you are in-house on payroll. So again, if you're not, it doesn't mean it's impossible, but it makes the argument much stronger when you're a full-time employee or a part-time employee.
Yeah. And actually, one more thing. If you are, we want you to get a letter of recommendation or a letter corroborating your critical role to the organization. And, the more senior the individual is who is signing that letter, the better. So if it's just from your direct supervisor, it may not hold as much weight than if it's coming from the CEO or the founder. Okay, so let's move on to high salary. USCIS is really strict on this point, we find, and they are, they want to see your tax returns. That would be the best evidence. They really, it seems that they take into account your base salary, but often bonuses, stock options, and other salary accoutrements or whatever you would call it. They typically will not consider that, when calculating your whether your salary meets the criteria.
Right, and for anyone who is working abroad, and we have to show that you've been earning a high salary abroad, finding the proof that shows what people earn in your field, in your country, is also something very challenging. It seems that no matter what evidence we find, USCIS will find a way to question the veracity, the legitimacy of that, that evidence. So finding reliable sources of reporting average salaries abroad and actually high-level salaries abroad is also key for anyone working outside the U.S.
And then I want to touch on commercial success.
Yeah.
So USCIS is, they really want to, for commercial success, they really want to see, actual figures. So box office numbers, TV ratings. We've argued viewership on YouTube and other platforms, and that has seemed to go well. But again, that's sort of, it's kind of iffy. So the more, definitive the figures are, the better. Ticket sales, things like that. And if you are not a performing artist, it is a little bit more difficult to get this criteria approved.
Yeah, and actually, they specifically ask for box office figures. It's showing, we have to show commercial success in the performing arts. And so they ask for box office figures. And if we give you the box office figures of a project you worked on, but you're not the lead actor, they can pick on it and say, well, you're not a performing artist. Yeah. So we do see them do that. We also see them do that regarding showcase of your work at artistic exhibitions. If you work on a project that is shown at a film festival, which is an artistic exhibition, USCIS can come back and say, well, they didn't come to see you. We don't have proof that this is actually an exhibition. So that's how they pick on that category. And I think there's a question in the chat.
Yeah, so Harshal asks, could attaching a critical role letter as independent contractor hurt the petition?
It's hard to say, in my opinion. Could it? Possibly. Could it be helpful? Possibly. It really depends on, I think, the content of the art, of the letter, and is there really something outstanding that your supervisor can say about your contribution other than you worked on a couple projects? But like I said, from what I'm seeing recently, being in-house is a better argument. If it's not possible, in general, I think that you put your best foot forward and use the best evidence that's available.
Another question is from Ramona, and she asks, how much do you think it hurts someone if they have one previous green card rejection on their file when filing a second time, especially in a case where there were 3 approved O-1s so far?
Good question, Ramona. So I would say, I think it depends on a couple factors. I think the biggest factor in my mind is how long ago was the rejection. If it was some years ago, I think that being able to include new evidence since the last filing is very helpful, and it certainly can be overcome in a second filing. There are many applicants, unfortunately, who have to file more than once to get approved. So having a previous denial is not fatal to a new application. Now, if you file a case and it is denied, and the officer who gets the case is thoughtful in their response and basically gives a detailed reason for why it's not approved, then in that case, I think that before refiling, you'd want to add some new evidence to your profile and not just refile the exact same case. In other circumstances, filing the same case can be effective and result in an approval. But for an EB-1 to turn around and file the exact same case, I think might not be the best strategy.
Okay, so I think we're going to pivot over to our last topic, which is, just general trends with O1s and EB1s. And we'll start with a question that came in from Jen L. from Jersey City. And Jen asks, can artists apply for NIW? Is the qualification similar to other field applicants like software engineers? And I mean, there's nothing that's preventing an artist from applying for an NIW, but they're just not commonly used for, for that field. They tend to be more difficult to get approved. And I think the EB-1A category is the best category for those who are in creative fields.
I agree.
Okay, and Kat S asks, and I will say that, the same criteria do apply to all the fields. So there are set criteria for the NIW. Yeah, for NIW, and whatever field, and they all apply. So just a little tidbit. Kat S asks from Los Angeles, are there any trends or restrictions on more criteria affecting ease of O1 and EB1 approval?
Let's see. So I'm not seeing O1 approvals being very difficult, particularly difficult at this moment. For anyone who works in the film and TV industry and has a lot of their work shown exclusively in film festivals, and the projects don't have other distribution, that can be a challenge right now. In terms of the EB1 adjudications, I don't think they're particularly difficult. There was a time a few years ago where I think EB1s did get very difficult, and they seem to be they have gotten much better in, I'd say, since last year, maybe the end of 2022. They're better than they were during the pandemic. Oh, and I think we do have a last question about the election and whether it is advisable to file before the election. And so the answer to that is we just don't know. So what I would say about that is, under the previous Trump administration, we did not see a big difference in O1 adjudication. We did see a difference in EB1 adjudication. So in terms of O1, I don't think it matters. In terms of EB1, it has been more favorable to apply under a Biden administration than it was to apply under a Trump administration.
Certainly. Okay, we have one last question, and it's coming from Partial in the chat. If I have 3 offer letters from various employers, and if one of them acts as my agent for the petition, can I still work as a freelancer or only for these 3 employers?
So, Partial, different attorneys have different interpretations of this. I personally take a more liberal approach, and I know that there's no consequence in doing so, with USCIS. So, freelancing is actually a little bit of a dirty word in the O1 world. So what the regulation does say is that you're allowed to work for multiple employers, and that your petitioner is able to add projects to your itinerary. So, is that equivalent to freelancing? Maybe, maybe not. But I would say that you're allowed to work for any U.S. employer in your field, as long as the position requires a high-level O1 talent.
Okay. Before we conclude, I do want to take one last question. It's from Melissa in the chat, and she's asking, how has or will the actor strike affect O1B visas when reapplying? I haven't seen any effect on renewals or extensions. I mean, I'm certain there must, well, actually, that's not true. There has been a change in how some of the unions have reacted, or how they have changed maybe their, how they review and have their criteria in determining whether cases are, should get a positive opinion or not. Specifically SAG, they have, changed their, how they adjudicate these cases. Do you want to go into?
Well, so,
sort of the difference?
before the strike, SAG would give us a letter saying they have no objection to an actor working here. And now basically SAG doesn't provide any letter at all. They'll only provide a positive opinion for people working on SAG productions. And if you're not working on a SAG production, they basically will just email us saying, unfortunately, we're unable to provide an opinion in your case. And that seems to be sufficient for USCIS at this point to approve actors. So actors are still getting approved, after the strike.
Yeah. And actually, there's one more question I do want to take. After this one, we're really going to wrap up. And this one comes from Gela, and she did, she sent her question in previously, and she's asking it in the chat. And the question is, how many audio engineers in the music industry have applied with your company recently, and what are the trends? And I think the question that had come in previously was, has any audio engineer ever applied for an EB-1 with you? And if yes, did they get approved? And I seem to recall that we have had an audio engineer
we actually work with a lot of people that work in sound. We work with sound mixers and sound editors and sound designers and all kinds of people that work in sound. And we certainly do, lots of O1s and EB1s. I don't know that there's no trend that's sticking out to me that is specifically for sound people or film and TV crew people. So, I mean, all I can say is they're getting approved just like everyone else.
Yeah, and we'd be happy to speak with you, if you want to sign up for a consultation, and we can go over your profile. Okay. If there's any other questions that you may have, you can contact us through our website, or through our email if you have our direct email. And I guess that concludes today's live stream. It was great talking with you and answering all your questions, and we will see you next time.
Thank you for joining us today for Vertical Shorts O1 and EB1 trends and EB-1 RFEs. We hope you found the insights shared by our expert immigration attorneys, Liz Profumo and Jordana Schwartz-Matricardi, to be valuable and informative. If you have any further questions or need more information, please don't hesitate to reach out. Stay connected for future events and updates. Until next time, take care and best of luck in your endeavors.
In advance and be like, don't forget to log into live stream.